And then it felt like a coincidence. Drug entered, escorting a beautiful girl. A stunning silhouette appeared in the door frame against bright lighting of the staircase descending into the semi-basement. The girl's straight hair was in a nice disarray. In the sunshine from the staircase, it had an aureole of sunny protuberances lighting up the dark room. The guys swallowed their tongues, trying not to drop them to the floor.
The beauty in the door frame entered the room. A warm, beaming smile touched her eyes and landed on every one of them. But once her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she looked directly at Petrovsky.
Mama Mike!
The band was simultaneously cheered up, senseless by the silly name, and in awe of an actual nice-looking girl, not only approaching but evidently knowing Petrovsky. But nobody was surprised more than Petrovsky himself. Petrovsky would recognize that face anywhere. Throughout all of time and despite any circumstances, this girl was the one he had met at the Pioneer Parade when she was in her early teens. Now she was a teenager.
Druk started to introduce her to me, but there was no need. I immediately recognized her as that girl Beata at the Pioneer Parade. I'd die of embarrassment if she knew that the half of the photo that they had split back then was still in my suitcase right here, right now, within an arm's reach. I told her, and her eyes lighted up. She remembered too. We couldn't stop laughing.
The political climate has changed for the worse from the summer of 1968 to the fall. Gone were the colorful murals, the polite back-and-forth banter between people and police, and the warm, cheery atmosphere. It had fallen to dark, muted coloring with gruff, overzealous police officers practically on every street corner, looking into every house and overseeing every aspect of their lives. It hadn't taken long for Grashk to fall into communist hands. Not many other cities had lasted long against the brutal, persistent onslaught. Even the parade from 4 years ago would have been better than this. Oppression had come back to their quiet country and brought fear, anxiety, and despair with it. But even now, there were bouts of rebellion, however small. They existed, and that was what mattered most.
In the fall of 1968, Soviet tanks rolled through the streets of Zagoria. Turmoil engulfed Grashk as the protesters struggled to retain control. Riots broke out in the streets. Radio and TV stations were taken over by Soviet officials.
In Petrovsky's mind, the Beatles followed the turn of events with their music. Schmiedels' repertoire changed from uplifting and hopeful Flying and Hello Goodbye to dark and deeply pessimistic Revolution, which came out as a single, yet unnumbered, just in time for the cruel events in Zagoria. Some of the sarcastic lyrics were directed at the left-wing protesters in the West, but Zagorian dissidents took inspiration from its anti-communist overtones and fierce rock and roll. Turmoil had erupted around Grashk, with protesters filling the streets, struggling to retain control of their country. To erase peace and freedom and replace it with something else, even if they used the same words for it. In communist vocabulary, the war was a compulsion to peace, and freedom was a conscious need, very much in tune with the Newspeak in 1984. In the cold winter of 1968, back in the underground, the friends listened to the White Album, acquired in the black market. They admired it 100 times over and over, but the first track, back in the USSR, left them confused. Their heroes seemed to lightheartedly carol the very oppressors which stomped upon their freedom. Or were the lyrics a tongue-in-cheek? Yet, unlike the lyrics, the music of Back in the USSR seemed to clash with the communist marches, freedom raging against oppression in a desperate battle for control. Protests faded into whispered comments. The die-hard resistance died off, the scent of burning flesh a distant memory. The marching music of the communists won out, as music was banned in droves, alongside books, phrases, foods, and colors.